you're in LA, you're in Beverly Hills. Do you ever get worried that you're going to see someone, or have you seen anybody involved in the Bling Ring, like Orlando Bloom or one of them? And do you feel like, oh shit, they know who I am? Or no, you don't worry about that?
No, that's the beauty of this work, is that I'm totally free now. No, it's not that I don't care. It's that like I feel so healed and so aligned and have owned my story so much that like the thought of having anxiety, and I've ran into Emma Watson, who's played me in a movie, and I've ran into like past members, and it's not that I'm like, oh, this is like an enjoyable experience, but like I've done my best to make amends to Orlando Bloom. I'm here to be a vessel for change, and I'm here really as like a humble servant. And I've always said, like, if any of those people need to sit down, need to be heard, need to whatever in order to like fully move on, I'm open to doing that. So
you're a busy lady, so let's rock and roll. So how are you? What are you up to today? It's a Wednesday. What does that look like on your schedule today?
I'm in my beautiful office in Los Angeles. I have a couple of meetings coming up today, but everything is good.
Are you in the Valley, or where in LA are you?
No, I live in Beverly Hills.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah, and my office is like 7 minutes from my house. It's like so nice. I don't have to sit in traffic and like deal with a commute. So
I don't know why I was thinking like Calabasas. Maybe because of
I'm born and raised. Yeah, I'm born and raised in the Valley. So
okay,
I
that's
went
why
to
I thought
Agora High School.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I used to live out by our mutual friend Jenna.
Yes, that's why I thought that.
Now that I'm an executive girly, I just couldn't handle the drive into my office anymore. It's like 3 hours a day in my car, and I just couldn't handle it.
No, dude, Agora Hills and Thousand Oaks is not LA. Like, I've led the bonfire meeting. I did Against All Odds, and I planned, if I'm going up to LA, it's 2.5 hours, 3. To get there, it's 5. I mean, it's 5.
Yeah, and so it's really far.
It's so far, even from within LA. So, but that is actually a beautiful segue into growing up, because your child, I am so excited to interview you. So I knew that, obviously I knew Bling Ring, I knew Pretty Wild, the reality TV show. But then in the past few days, I've been listening to you on other podcasts, and you are such a well-rounded, knowledgeable person. You're a doula. You know all this stuff about like childhood trauma and how it manifests in maladaptive behavioral patterns. And like, I'm listening to you talk, and I'm like, okay, I was already excited. Now I'm even more excited for my audience to like learn from you. It's so cool, the journey that you took from this wild childhood in LA to having a reality TV show, to going to jail twice, and now this beautiful life with your kids and your treatment centers and your business. And it's very, very cool. So let's start with growing up and what the dynamic was in your house, because that plays a really big part in your life later.
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. And you brought up the bonfire meeting. I just did the 40-minute pitch for them last Thursday after a huge conference. We had a conference on treating adolescents in the addiction and mental health space. And then I went over there, and it was interesting because a lot of my colleagues just don't really know my story. So it was interesting to see, their reaction to the degrees of trauma that I experienced growing up. And I always say to people, like, I'm big in the 12 steps. Like I will share about my trauma and my story. But I always say that, like, I don't believe those things are why I became an alcoholic, So, and I'll get into my reasons for that. But I think the biggest is that, like, across the globe, right? Lots of people are dealing with far worse trauma than I went through. And I don't know if you know the ACEs study, ACEs Too High. It's called the Adverse Childhood Experience Study. And anyone can go and take their test online right now and see what their ACE score is.
Oh, that's so cool. Is that the Kaiser one that you referenced on the
Yes,
Skinny
it was
Confidential?
developed by Kaiser.
Perfect, because I wanted to ask you
Exactly.
about this. Okay, awesome.
Yeah. So basically this study is really interesting because it looks at markers, right? There's a set of questions, you answer the questions, and then you get your answer of like what your ACE score is. And what they've done is they've measured health outcomes based off of how high you score. And so I scored a 9 out of 10. So I'm somebody that had a lot of adverse childhood experiences and a lot of trauma. So I grew up in an alcoholic household. My parents divorced when I was 3. There was physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual violence that was happening from the time that I was 4 years old throughout my childhood. And it was very much so like sex, drugs, and rock and roll, you know? And so I grew up in a very volatile environment where I was exposed to far more than any child should have been. And so when I got sober, I had a lifetime of trauma that I had never looked at. And in my earlier days of my recovery, I always thought, oh, well, these are the reasons why I want to, you know, check out of my reality, right?
Yeah.
Why I don't want to be here, right? Is because I have loads and loads and loads and loads of trauma that I wanted to escape from. And so when I was in my earlier years of recovery, I thought that I drank over you, over that, over this circumstance, over all of these different circumstances. And then what ended up transpiring was I had this kind of moment in my recovery where I realized, like, oh, like the drugs and the alcohol were my solution. Absolutely. The trauma was a factor as to why I liked drinking and using. But those are the things that make me an alcoholic. Lots of people have an ACE score of 8, 9, 10 and never become an alcoholic or an addict. Yeah. I want to add something though to this is like when you read this study and you look at the health outcomes, it's looking at, you know, your chance of developing an autoimmune condition, cancer, of course, suicidality, all of these things. But they did a follow-up study a few years later where it looked at your resilience score. And so that resilience score can offset the ACE score. And so it's important for everybody to do both. But I am somebody that's like very, very resilient, right? I'm adaptable. I'm able to, you know, I'm a fighter through and through. And so, you know, when I got sober, I really decided that I wanted to overcome. I didn't want to be a victim to my circumstances anymore. And I wanted to transform them into something much more powerful.
Totally.
And so, you know, of course, the first step was getting sober. And I got sober in the rooms. And I remember going through the big book the first time. You know, and for anyone who doesn't know my story, although I'm sure most people who listen to the podcast have heard me on other podcasts, you know, I became a heroin addict and I got sober when I was 19. Like the progression of my drinking and using was rapid. It was really bad and really dark. And then bam, I got sober, right? I was court mandated to a year in treatment in lieu of 6 years, 3 to 6 years of doing some hard prison time because of my disease. And, you know, I remember going through the big book the first time and really understanding what it meant to be an alcoholic, right? Understanding the disease model and going through the steps absolutely provided me with not just a design for living, but like a freedom, right? A freedom from the obsession to drink or use. But I was still left with a ton of trauma. And so over the first decade of my sobriety, I was always a seeker. I'm always somebody that loved to learn. I did terribly in school because I just could not focus. My home environment was so traumatic. And it's interesting because I interviewed Dr. Gabor Mate like really early in my recovery. I was writing for Vice magazine when I first got sober. And he said something really interesting to me. Like, so many kids these days are growing up in traumatic households because we have, you know, just so many generations of traumatized individuals who are raising children.
Right.
And he said, and then they're diagnosed with ADD or ADHD like I was as a young child. And the reality of the circumstances, how can you expect a child to sit in school and to focus and to be able to do their homework and to be able to apply the knowledge that they're learning when they're constantly in a state of fight or flight, when they're constantly trying to survive? And so that was my experience, but I always loved learning. And so over the first like kind of decade of my journey, it was really about finding myself in like these different stages of my personal evolution. And I started in talk therapy, and I didn't really find that to be effective for me. I tried EMDR, I tried DBT, I tried CBT, I tried all of these different modalities, and there's nothing inherently wrong with any of those. I think like an entry point into therapy and doing cognitive behavioral therapy or talk therapy can be a wonderful thing, but for me, I needed something more. So, you know, when I got sober, I got married really early. I had 2 children. We built a business, which is still in existence. I'm just no longer part of it. Although I'm like great friends with my ex-husband, but he now has that company.
That was so interesting to me too. When I met you at Dopeywood a few weeks ago, you said someone asked a question about your ex, and they said, "Oh, where's Evan or whatever?" And you said, "Oh, he's right over there." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, they obviously have such a great relationship." But I was wondering about that, about the treatment center, about whether or not you guys still owned that together. But I love that you guys are still friends, because it's kind of recent, right? When did you guys split up? It was recent, right?
It's like 5 years now, so it's
not that
been a
recent.
while. Yeah, so we were we were together for a little over 10, married for a little over 9 years. Okay. And we separated the end of, I think, 2020. So now we're in 2025. I mean, time flies, girl. It's been like, and I'll say like, it was not like the easiest experience to go through. I mean, divorce is tragic. I never wanted that for my children. I said that I would never ever get divorced because both of my parents have been married and divorced so many times. But at the end of the day, like, it was the right thing to do for both Evan and myself.
How did you manage your sobriety during that time? That's what I wanted to ask you about. So you would have had, how many years did you have sober at that time?
That would have been 10 going into 11 years of sobriety at that point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you do anything different with your sobriety program during that time? Did you feel like you needed to ramp up anything? How did you manage that? And did you feel like, I'm assuming the answer to this is going to be no, but did you feel like using or drinking or some sort of other maybe? Because for me, at 10 years, when something challenging happens, like my husband was relapsing for a while, it was really bad. He's got 2 years now, but it was really bad. And everyone around us was like, how are you not using? How are you not using? And I'm like, so I had 8 years, and I'm like, I never think about using, but what I do is overeat. What I do is think about smoking cigarettes again.
Yeah, those cross addictions are fucking gnarly. Yeah.
Yeah. So how did you manage during that time?
I mean, what I'll say is this, like, in recovery, life shows up on life's terms. Like, no matter what, like, life is going to show up for you. And there's been plenty of moments in my recovery where I've felt like I was going to die. Like, how am I, and those moments are always like the launching towards more greatness. It's interesting because I think a lot of us are seekers. And I talk a lot now, in our field. So many people are talking about like the use of psychedelics, right? And that they're this like amazing tool to help you to see yourself and to grow to like higher states of consciousness. And I don't want to like necessarily go down the whole rabbit hole right now, but like in my lived experience as somebody who works the 12 steps and has been a practicing Buddhist for a long time, like those elevations in my consciousness have always happened right after these like dark night of the soul moments. And I've had many throughout my recovery. And every time that those things have happened, I've thrown myself back into the work and found new tools and new things that like help me to continue to grow.
That may be my favorite thing anybody has ever said on the show in 5 years. because that is what I think also. And I love what you just said. So I just did a TED talk on post-traumatic growth. And the whole TED talk was about how traumatic, challenging events can be catalysts to positive growth and change, and that they're not liabilities, they're assets. And I love what you just said. Like the psychedelic thing, sure, that's a different conversation. I don't really have an interest in that. I fucking hated acid. I hated mushrooms. I want control of my brain. And I understand it's microdosing, and who knows, maybe one day I'll change my mind. But I love the idea that that the dark night of the soul moments are catalysts to growth. And it comes as a direct result of this amazing program that we all have access to for free, because I did the exact same thing when he was using. I got back into 12-step, which I hadn't really been doing, and I started seeking again. And I love that. That's such a beautiful way to look at that. So during that time, you got back into the work, and you feel like you gained even more tools during your divorce during that time?
Yeah, well, here's what I would say. It's like there is a real problem with our generation and how we're raising this next generation of children, where we're so afraid of pain and suffering. Like, people do not know how to sit in the discomfort of their life and suffer, right? And so I'm not saying to anybody that like you have to sit in suffering forever, right? But what I am saying is that there's solutions to that suffering. And so, when I came home one day with my two children from picking them up from school and was served papers, and my husband at the time said, "I've gotten an apartment, it's fully furnished, I'm leaving, sell the house, I'm out," right? I absolutely found myself in the fetal position in my bedroom going, "God, why are you doing this to me? Like, why are you doing this to me? Like, I don't understand why in this lifetime I have to suffer this much, you know?" And I definitely felt like I was drowning and I couldn't come up for air, in that moment. And I clearly heard this still small voice inside of me go, "I'm not doing this to you, I'm doing this for you." And that absolutely was like my experience, is that was God doing for me what I couldn't do for myself, or universe, whatever you want to say it, however you want to, whatever you want to call it. And so I will say that, like, yes, I threw myself back into the work, but I also found therapeutic modalities that really worked for me for the first time ever in not just processing the trauma, but actually getting rid of it. And so what I found was that, like, the CBT and the talk therapy and all of those things had been great. They allowed me to talk about it for the first time ever, to kind of, it's almost like you have a lifetime of paperwork that's like all over, right? And it's never been organized. And what I'll say is that those modalities gave me the ability to reorganize. Can I pause for one quick second? I'm
Sure,
so sorry.
yeah,
My
of
daughters,
course.
you can edit this.
Oh, sure.
Honey, I'm on
problem.
a podcast right now. I can't talk.
Sorry. Did you get this off the sale?
It's not until tonight. I've got to go. I love you.
I love you.
Wait, hold on. What sale did she want you to get?
Zara. Zara sale is tonight, 9 o'clock.
Wait, how old is she?
She's 12.
Okay, this seems like this would be the best part of having a daughter.
She's so great.
Like, I didn't know there was a Zara sale. Yeah. So like now she's I know
the Zara sale,
Mom.
Daughter. I know.
That's
the Zara sale.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
So it was like I had years and years of all of these papers, and then finally they've been like reorganized and they're in a filing cabinet, right? But sure. I still was carrying around all of these filing cabinets with me, and I'm like, wherever I go, there I am. Like, why the fuck am I like holding on to all this stuff? And so we have these moments in life where we feel like there's nowhere to go, like we're stuck, right? And these patterns and behaviors keep coming up because they're so deeply ingrained. These belief systems in our subconscious are so deeply ingrained in us. And what I found was I read this amazing book called No Bad Parts. And it's written by this amazing man. His name is Richard Schwartz, Dr. Dick Schwartz.
Oh.
And
IFS, internal family systems, right?
Systems,
Yeah.
right.
Family systems.
So
yes. Okay.
I threw myself into 2 years of working with this therapist, sometimes twice weekly, sometimes once weekly, doing parts work in conjunction with doing somatic healing. And what I found was that I was finally able to start discarding the files in the filing cabinet once and for all. And what I found was that, you know, my body was storing a lot of this trauma, and I was able to really like get in there and release those patterns and behaviors. So, you know, for me, doing this degree of work, this really like heavy work over the next 2 years, led to like a lot of, like you were saying, post-traumatic growth. And so I'm so grateful. I will say, like, at the end of my marriage, I was so lost. Evan really, like, and I think the dynamic that we had in a lot of ways was that he was my higher power. And I thought I was doing all of the right things. You know, I got married, I stayed sober, we owned a house, we had a business, we had 2 kids, the dog, the this, the that. And we loved each other a lot, but I think that we both had blinders on in a lot of ways, because both of us were living at that point on like automatic pilot. And I just don't have like the luxury of living that way, you know, like where it's just like a lack of mindfulness and just not really like knowing myself. And I think part of this is like an age thing too. Like that was the end of my 20s, going into my 30s, going into that period of time, my like Saturn return, right? I don't know if you're familiar with like astrological stuff.
I am a little, and it's interesting that you just say that, because when I was listening to the Skinny Confidential, you said it was in 2019, and you are telling you're still married, and you say, when I first saw him lead at a meeting, I felt like God was speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And you said that in the interview, and I grabbed my phone and I was like, well, now they're split up. I was like, I have to ask about that. And I know that obviously she stayed sober. And so that's so fascinating that you share that. It seems like you totally did know that. And I know a lot of people feel that way. That's really helpful that you just shared that. But when you make someone else your higher power, like you said, it gets you away from getting to know yourself. How long had you been sober when you met him?
So I entered into treatment at the end of 2010, and you know, part of that treatment was going to meetings, and I had always seen Evan at meetings, and I was like the worst person in meetings, right? Like such a big ego. I thought everybody was talking about me. I would share. I was talking about this in the meeting. Yeah. Well, I was sharing, you know,
they might have been. They might have been.
I mean, they may not have, but like I just thought that like I knew it all. Like I lacked total humility. And what ended up transpiring is I relapsed on whippets, and I had this like kind of come to Jesus moment where I was like, I can't stop. Like I just can't stop using drugs. Like I literally cannot. And what ended up happening was like 4 months into my treatment. In that whole time in treatment, like I thought I knew it all. I was so resistant. I was like disruptive in groups. I was sharing at meetings, like in, you know what I mean? Like it was just the Alexa show and everybody should just fall in line, you know? And what ended up happening was I hit this moment of like where humility came rushing in. And at that point, Evan had like 5 or 6 years of recovery, and he always went to this 11th step meeting and he would share. And so I went to that meeting and I said, I need a good, like solid female sponsor. Like, who do you have for me? And he gave me the number of this woman, Hannah, and this group that she was in. They were like, basically like, they were just such a solid group of women, like big book thumpers through and through. And I just disappeared for like 5 months and did nothing except for like worked with my sponsor and went to meetings, and that was it. And right around the time that I had a year of sobriety, I came back, and I think Evan realized, like, wow, she's like such a different woman now.
Yeah.
And we started to hang out mostly as friends. And then June, so like a year and a couple of months into my recovery, that's when he asked me out on our first date, and then the
Okay.
rest was history. We were
Right.
married within 9 months, and had our first daughter a year later. But yeah.
And the reason I say, for the audience that doesn't know, the reason I say people may have been talking about you, and I'm kind of kidding, I'm sure they weren't. This is something I wanted to ask you. So this is 2008 and 9, right? And this is the height of the Paris Hilton, Britney Spears, Lindsay Lohan being out of their minds on drugs, right? This is the celebrity drug, TMZ, Star Magazine. And I lived in LA at that time too, but I was not on a reality TV show like you were. I was just a drug addict, but I kind of excused a little bit of my behavior because I felt like, oh, this is just what we do. And I wasn't actually even an actress or anything.
Yeah.
You actually had a TV show. You were actually famous. Did you feel like this is what famous girls do? I'm allowed to do this. I don't want to listen to anyone else. Like, how on earth did you break believing that? Because that was something I even held on to, and it wasn't even true for me. So how did you escape that mentality, and how prevalent was that mentality for you? Did you feel like, I'm a celebrity, this is how I should act?
I don't know if it was so much like, I'm a celebrity and this is how I should act. I think that I grew up in an environment where that was the norm. And I think a lot of us were like definitely influenced by that time in our pop culture history, certainly. But I will say that it was a barrier, and it was a barrier to me getting sober, because I thought, if everybody else is doing it, why can't I? Right. And the reality is that I can't, because I'm a drug addict, right? That like I don't have an off button, a stop button that like works for me. And I really tried it all. I tried to like go stay at ashrams to get sober. I tried therapy. I tried Suboxone. I tried, switching drugs. I tried not using heroin. I tried, what I mean, getting rid of all of the friends. I tried all of the things under the sun, and none of it was going to work for me. I had to go through the experience that I had to go through. And I always tell people, like, going to jail was the best thing that ever happened to me. It's obviously unfortunate that the reason why I went to jail initially was because I caused somebody great harm. But at the end of the day, like, that led to not just me getting sober, but to me being able to really help people. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Those moments of coming face to face with myself, really, that was the thing that like launched me into sobriety. And 14 years later, like, here I am. So I don't have any regrets when it comes to my history at all.
Well, and you have this incredible story to share, obviously. I mean, like you were saying, the first time you went to jail, you ended up doing 30 days, right? At Linwood, which is like the LA County jail, correct? Is that right?
Yeah, I went to Linwood Correctional. I don't remember the exact amount of time. It was somewhere, a little over a month, maybe 6 weeks or something like that. But yeah, I went to Linwood Correctional Facility, and yeah, it was definitely a brutal experience. But it was like the first crack in the foundation, right? Like, I had built this huge life for myself that was full of like chaos and poor choices and addiction and all of these things. And that was the first time that I started to kind of question my relationship with drugs specifically. I never wanted to admit that I was an alcoholic, because my father was an alcoholic and I wanted to be nothing like him. But that was the first time where I was like, I probably shouldn't use heroin anymore.
Right. That's hilarious to me that was the first time, but I totally understand, because for me, I really believed, and I want to know if this feels familiar to you, if relatable to you. I felt like, no. I'm not actually a drug addict or an alcoholic. I just accidentally got strung out on the thing you have to do every day. That's the problem. And from my understanding is you kind of felt that way too, because you had to detox in there. And that's when you kind of felt like, oh shit, like I was way more physically addicted than I realized. This is a problem. This is problematic. Is that what made you start thinking that while you were there? And also, did you know you were going to be in solitary confinement, or were you terrified that you were going to be in general population with people that knew who you were?
I did not know that I was going to be in solitary. I thought that
Okay.
I was going to be in general population. I actually was begging for them to put me in general population because solitary is awful. I would not wish that on my worst enemy. But yeah, I mean, detoxing in jail, I never wanted to go through that degree of suffering. It's not that I didn't know that the life that I was leading was unsustainable. It's that I had no desire to change it, you know? And so that was kind of like the first time, like getting to 30, 40, whatever it was, days clean. I say clean because I certainly wasn't sober, right? I was abstinent from substances, not by choice. That was kind of the first time where I started to really reflect on my relationship specifically with opiates, where I saw like, okay, this was awful. I don't want to live like this anymore. I shouldn't do these drugs. That being said, the first night that I was out, I was blackout drunk, stoned, like the whole thing. You know what I mean? Like it didn't last very long. Within 2 weeks, I was back to shooting dope. So it's
you
not
were?
like that. Yeah, it's not like that was that sustainable for me.
Right.
But that was kind of the first moment where I started to question my relationship with the substances.
When you were in jail that first time. And for people that don't know, because I didn't know all the details, because I was using too at that time. Do you mind sharing briefly, in whatever degree? I know you've told this story a million times, but do you mind sharing just a little bit about what got you in jail, why you were sentenced? Because also you didn't know you were going to get out in 30 days, right? What did you get sentenced to? Didn't you get sentenced like 6 months or something?
Yeah, so I did know that I wasn't going to serve my full sentence because Linwood is the situation is that there's only a couple of county jails that can house women, and that they're all so full that you're going to be released doing less time than what you suspected. Most people do between like 10 and 20%, sometimes even less of their sentences. So I was sentenced to 6 months in Linwood Correctional Facility on a robbery charge, with a 3 to 6 year suspension over my head. So that means if you do this sentence, you're going to be sentenced to this sentence and 3 years of probation. If during that window where you're on probation, you violate, meaning you use drugs, you have a dirty test, you offend again, you are going to be mandated to do the 3 to 6 years in prison, not federal prison, but in prison. And so, I think I was just so, like, my brain was so warped at that time that I didn't realize, how easy it would be for me to offend. I didn't take it seriously. And so when I got out that first night, I was drunk. I showed up to like 1 to 2 probation sessions and then never again. And I was back to, trying to score drugs. At this point, I had no money. I couldn't afford my gas or my electric in my like studio apartment. It was a freezing cold winter. I was already back to engaging in all of the behaviors that I was, originally trying to like get drugs, and which included, of course, selling my body for drugs, panhandling on the streets, running drugs for other people, all of the things that we do. And I stopped showing up to probation, and I was arrested again for possession of heroin. I had somebody else's ID on me that I had like picked up on the floor of a club, so that way I could get into clubs, because at this point I was still underage. I was 18 turning 19. Long story short, I was rearrested, and that DA was so adamant that I go and finish this whole, the whole sentence in prison. And there was an amazing judge. His name was Peter Espinoza, and he really advocated for me. And him and my attorney worked together to move forward with the sentence of getting me a year in treatment in lieu of that prison sentence. And for years, I wrote Judge Espinoza letters saying, like, thank you so much. I'm still sober, like, because of judges like you. And he's since retired. And so has the attorney that like helped me to get that sentence. But I really think that it's a shame that there are so many people that are incarcerated for drug, nonviolent offenders that are incarcerated for drug crimes. And, we should be focusing more so on like diversion and access to treatment instead of, just sending people off to prison, because it doesn't do anything. When you're in there, they're not rehabilitating you. There's no focus on rehabilitation. You're sitting in a cell, you're doing your time. That is it.
Yeah. So you didn't have any money left over from the show when you got out?
No. I made $10,000 a week. That money went to my attorneys and to drugs. So I was blowing through like thousands and thousands of dollars on drugs and legal fees. And so when I finished that sentence, there was still a question of, are we going to do another season of the show? Because the numbers were really, really good. And ultimately, I think, oh my God, we gave those producers such a run for their money. It was not an enjoyable experience for them working with us. I mean, it's like wrangling a circus at all times.
Well, okay. Although at the same time, you gave them a mega gift on day 2 of season 1 when the police showed up to your house. They must have been so happy that happened in like this sick reality TV producer way. No one could have known that on day 2, this beautiful model type girl was going to have the cops show up for one of the most infamous, what they create as one of the most infamous crime rings ever. I understand again from listening to you that it wasn't kind of what they made it, but it was a great opportunity to make it look like that, right? And of course, guys, I'm referencing the Bling Ring. There's a movie about it. I recently watched the documentary, but you actually gave them a huge gift. So I can't believe you did 1 season or 2? One. Mm-hmm. They must have been desperate to do a season 2. When you got out.
Yeah, I think that there was talks forever and going back and forth. I think the reality is that like my addiction was so bad at that point that there was really not like a path forward, And so it was like I'm the type of drug addict where like I'm a liability. Like I could be dead, you know what I mean, at like any moment. So I just think that like they were like, no. That's probably not going to work out.
Right. Did you want to do another season? What was your experience of doing the first season? I know you were using, but did you want to do another one?
I think at the time I did, and I'm so grateful that didn't work out. Like at the time, like the money, the property, the prestige, all the things that they say in AA were like very enticing to me. But like ultimately I was just not able to do that. And I'm so grateful that worked out the way that it did, because, I probably would not have made it much longer. And especially like the environments that they put you in of going to the club and doing this and that, and you know what I mean? All the things that come with that. Like there's no way in God's green earth that I was going to be able to, keep it together for another season.
Did they know you were using? Because how around are they? Are they with you 24/7 for some period of time? And were you shooting heroin by then, or were you smoking? Because I know you started smoking oxys on foil, right, before it progressed. Mm-hmm. What were you doing during season 1? And did they see you going in bathrooms and staying in there forever? Do they know?
Yeah, they knew the whole time. I mean, there's no way that I can hide it. It's not that they're there 24/7, but they're close to it, you know? So, yeah, I mean, they caught drugs on us on a regular
Oh, they did.
basis. We're always mic'd, so they knew that we were using. I mean, I was nodding off like all the time. Doing interviews with me was nearly impossible. And like my using for most of the show, I was smoking heroin, sometimes oxys, but this was like the time
Okay.
where they made them like impossible to smoke, so I wasn't really
Okay.
doing so much of that.
Right.
But yeah, I didn't want like track marks all over my arms. I was shooting occasionally. And it wasn't really until I had been shooting before, during I went back to smoking, and then I went back to shooting after I got out of jail.
Okay. Okay. I heard you say
Yeah.
on another podcast that you were like a bad IV user. So was I. I did
Yeah.
it, but I was literally bad at it. Like blood everywhere. Everyone's
Yep.
so annoyed with me. I can't hit. So I'm screaming, crying, but I refuse
Yep.
to smoke. I was also like a nightmare when it came
Yeah.
to all that stuff. So after your second jail time, and they give you, or you get arrested the second time, and then they give you a year in treatment, that's your sobriety date. You never use again.
No, I used. I relapsed
Oh, the
on
whippets.
whippets.
That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
You
yeah.
said that. Okay. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so I went December 1st, I was rearrested. I went back into jail, kicked for 10 days. Then I was sentenced to a year in treatment. I was moved to the treatment center. And I mean, this is like cold turkey, like no Suboxone, no Sublocade, no support, no nothing. And I went into treatment, and like I said, I was just like really fighting the process. I always opened my AA talks with, you know, I came into recovery totally desperate. Like my circumstances were like I had no money, I had nowhere to live, I had nowhere to go, I had 2 felonies, I'm unemployable, nothing, you know, like literally nothing.
Yeah.
But I was totally unwilling. And in
Right.
those first couple of months, I was
Yeah.
just desperate but unwilling
Right.
to listen to you, unwilling to hear what you had to say, unwilling to go to group therapy, unwilling to touch my trauma, unwilling to process anything, resistant. And it wasn't until that relapse where all of a sudden I was so, my condition was so desperate, and my willingness kind of clicked into gear there, where I was like, oh, the drugs aren't the problem. The people aren't the problem. The circumstances aren't the problem. Like, you are the problem. So, what are you going to do with this? And so at that moment, that's when I kind of was like catapulted into the work. And I started to engage in therapy, and I started to go to groups, and I sat down in meetings, and I shut the fuck up and had nothing to say and just listened. And I got a sponsor, and God bless that woman, Deborah. She raised me like I was feral. You know, she was like, you're gonna get the treasury commitment at this meeting, Alexis. And I'd be like, why? I don't want to do that. And she'd be like, because you don't know how to manage a checking account, and now you're gonna learn. You know, right. She was like, you're gonna go and make the coffee at this meeting. Why? Because you don't know how to do the fucking dishes. It's not that I didn't know how to do the dishes. It's just that like I didn't have the skills. I didn't have the willingness, you know. That woman taught me how to become a woman, you know, how to care for myself, how to care for others, how to get out of my own way, how to shut up that monkey mind that would like never stop. And it was through just service, right? She threw me into service. She got me out of my own way. I was desperate and willing enough to do what she said because I had to believe that she had some sort of a solution. And slowly but surely, what ended up happening was I had a spiritual experience. I started to develop self-esteem by doing esteemable acts. My mind started to become more quiet because I was more focused on other people than I was focused on myself. Like all of the promises started to come true. And then I was on fire, and I like wanted to start taking women through the steps, and I wanted to, start going to school to become a counselor, which I did. I wanted to start running groups. I wanted to start helping other people. And that's how, we ended up opening the sober living, right? It was just like I wanted to do all of these things in order to help others, and I wasn't focused on like what am I going to get out of it anymore. I just was reaping the benefits of that action, and slowly but surely started to find a solution to all of my problems, not just my desire to like check out all the time, but I learned how to live and how to be an adult.
Yeah. Whippets.
Mm-hmm.
How did that lead to, because arguably whippets, it's not shooting heroin, right?
Yeah.
What about that relapse made you think, oh, this is a really problematic? Because you also could have just said, well, it's not like I'm shooting heroin, it's fucking whippets. What was the
and that was my
circumstances around that
mindset.
relapse?
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, that was my mindset going into it. I had a roommate who was working at a Starbucks. I'd never done a whippet before in my life. And we were parked in some parking lot going to the next like group therapy thing.
Oh shit.
And I'm in the back seat, and I like, I'm on like whatever, my 5th round of whippets at that point in the day. And a cop came up to the window and like knocked on the window and was like, what the fuck are you guys doing here? And so we're like shoving all the drugs under the seat and all the things. And it was, he ended up walking away, and we came out unscathed. But it was in that moment that I was like, dude, you're about to go to prison for 6 years for fucking violating the terms of your treatment because you're doing fucking whippets. Like, what a loser. It was like in that moment that my whole world, like kind of like my life flashed before my eyes. And I was like, I actually have it really good right now. And I have no gratitude for the fact that like I'm in the circumstance that I'm in. And that propelled me into having that realization, like wherever you go, there you are. Right. It was just like, wow, okay, so here we go again, Alexis,
How did you get into Buddhism? You mentioned earlier on that you practice Buddhism. How did you fall into that? And is that something that you still do?
Yeah. I was raised by like a mom who was like a pot smoking hippie. She has her PhD in consciousness studies, for God's sakes. And she was always into like manifestation, and yeah, she's wonderful.
From where? What college? What college did you get that from?
I don't even know. But she's like this fucking hippie dippy mom who
model,
we were always we were always like, we had life-size Buddhas in our house, and we would go and study with like monks and go to church at like these utilitarian, like she just was like always a seeker. And we would go stay at ashrams, and we would meditate, and we would, do affirmations and like all of this like kind of new age hippy dippy stuff. And I think like for me, when I first got sober, like the concept of God was really difficult for me, and it didn't really correlate.
Okay.
And it's interesting because on like the opposite side, my dad was Christian, my stepmom was Christian. We went to evangelical Christian church out where I lived growing up. And there was aspects of that too that like resonated with me, but there's just such like a beautiful synergy between 12-step and Buddhism. Like really totally. The foundation is that we have this ego that drives us to make decisions that are rooted in a lack of mindfulness, right? We're driven by fear. We're driven by this ego that just, it's insatiable. It wants more and more and more. And that idea aligns perfectly with Buddhism, right? We have this ego, this monkey mind that's always insatiable and insufferable and always wants more and is never satisfied. And the solution for that is to develop a practice of mindfulness, right? To separate from the ego and to focus on the servitude of others, right? Reducing people's suffering. And the 12 steps does the same thing, right? And so it's really about developing a practice of mindfulness, of understanding our defects of character and doing the opposite of that and being of service to others. So there was such like a perfect synergy to that. I'm not a perfect Buddhist by any means. I just think for me, the idea that, our human nature and the ego causes and drives our suffering, and that there's a solution for that. And it is, removing the desire and the things that drive us, and being of service to others. It works for me.
Yeah. What is your mindfulness practice? What type of meditation do you do? What does a day look like for you if it is perfectly aligned with what you would like to do life-wise and your spiritual reprieve, your 24-hour practice?
So for me, the second that I wake up in the morning, I do my own kind of version of a third step, which is just basically saying, like, I'm offering myself to the universe to be helpful. Like, do with me what you will. Like, remove me from the bondage of self, remove me from my ego, remove me from my defects of character, so that way I can do your will, not my will, right? And allow me to be a person that instills hope in others based off of my story, right? And so it starts there. I go, then I go and I make my morning coffee. I sit in my living room. I do journaling, like just free-handed journaling, like whatever's there, I let it go on the paper. I sit down after my mind's a little bit more quiet, and I do a morning practice of meditation for, it can be anywhere from 10 minutes to 30 minutes. And in that time, towards the end, I always focus on like the things that I'm grateful for and why. So really focusing my intention too on people that need support. Like, I'm so grateful for this person in my life. Please remove their suffering, bring them closer to their consciousness, and their connection with a higher power. Allow them to see, any blocks that are coming up for them. How can I be useful for them? And then basically, like in my day to day, and I'm not perfect in this either, but in my day to day, I operate from a place of how can I be helpful rather than what can I get? And that's just what's worked for me. At night, I reflect on my day. Most of the time, I don't have a lot of stuff to clean up because, I don't, I try to just be like a good human. If there's anything that needs to be cleaned up, I clean it up the next day. And that's basically, how I operate in the day to day.
You mentioned somatic healing. I'm really interested in that. I'm in fitness. I'm a personal trainer. What was the somatic healing that you did? And guys, somatic healing is when you connect with your body to release, like you said, trauma, or getting into your physical body as a modality of therapy. What did somatic healing look like for you?
There's an amazing book called The Body Keeps Score. Anybody can go pick it up. It's Bessel van der Kolk. I hope I'm saying that correctly. But the principle, the foundation, the idea of it is that our body stores trauma inside of itself. Like the autonomic nervous system is still activated from the trauma that we experienced when we were 4, 5, 6, whatever early age. And so I went to an amazing therapist, and basically, this was 2 years after doing internal family systems work. So a lot of this stuff had been released, but there was still some parts that was really activated. And the beauty of IFS is it's also very somatic, right? Like scanning the body, like we're thinking about something that's coming up from us, like where is it going to be stored? Can we go to that place, right? Meet that part within ourselves, hear what it has to say, help it to release. But for me, I would see this therapist, and a lot of the time I didn't even talk. Like I laid on a massage table, and she would ask what's coming up for me, and she would like scan my body, and she would do things like sometimes we would put like weights, like weighted blankets on certain parts of me and see like if more would be revealed if it felt that
That's
pressure
so cool.
and felt safe. Or she would like hold different parts of my body as I was talking. Or if there was parts in the therapy sessions where I would not feel grounded anymore, she would apply like pressure to my feet so that way I felt really stabilized.
That's
so
really
that
cool.
yeah,
I
that
love
was that experience for me.
That's beautiful. Okay, last question, then I'll let you go. So have you ever seen, you're in LA, you're in Beverly Hills, do you ever get worried that you're going to see someone, or have you seen anybody involved in the Bling Ring, like Orlando Bloom or one of them, and do you feel like, oh shit, they know who I am? Or no, you don't worry about that?
No, that's the beauty of this work, is that I'm totally free now. No, it's not that I don't care. It's that like I feel so healed and so aligned and have owned my story so much that like the thought of having anxiety, and I've ran into Emma Watson, who's played me in a movie, and I've ran into like past members, and it's not that I'm like, oh, this is like an enjoyable experience, but
Right.
like, and I've always, I've done my best to make amends to Orlando Bloom. And, I've actually gone, and I didn't partake in the robbery of Rachel Bilson, but I went and sat down on her podcast and just had like
cool.
a really therapeutic,
I didn't even know that.
Yeah. Had a really therapeutic experience with her too. And like my sister was able to make amends to her, and it was just, So
that's really cool.
I mean, I don't have like, I'm here to be a vessel for change, and I'm here really as like a humble servant. And I've always said, like, if any of those people need to sit down, need to be heard, need to whatever in order to like fully move on, I'm open to doing that. So
that's really beautiful. Well, I know you got to run. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Janine.